Welcome to Founding Chronicles, where we uncover the hidden stories of America's past. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a journey into history. Today, we bring you a story. From the year 1903, a tale of three sisters who seemed alike in every way, but the middle one harbored a shocking secret that would change everything. The year was 1903. And in the quiet town of Millbrook, Ohio, life moved with the slow, deliberate rhythm of horse-drawn carriages and coal-streaked smokestacks. On the edge of town, where the fields stretched wide and the river bent in a lazy curve, stood a modest white-clapboard house with green shutters. Inside lived the Barton family, known to neighbors simply as the Three Sisters. They were identical in appearance, each one sharing the same sharp brown eyes, the same pale skin that flushed like rose petals when embarrassed, and the same slender hands that moved gracefully, even when performing the most menial of tasks. People who saw them walking together often did a double take, unsure which sister was which. But while the townsfolk admired their beauty and poise, they could never have guessed the secret that lay hidden in the heart of the middle sister, Lillian. Lillian was 17, and to most eyes, she was no different from her sisters, Margaret and Edith. Margaret, the eldest by 3 years, carried herself with a quiet dignity, her mind often absorbed in books or the ledger of the family's small general store. Edith, the youngest, was lively and whimsical, always running barefoot through the meadows, chasing butterflies, or laughing with the local children by the river. Lillian, sandwiched between them, was seen as sweet and polite, the one who could calm arguments, fetch water without spilling a drop, and sew with a patience that seemed almost unnatural. But Lillian bore a burden the world did not see. She carried a secret that could unravel the careful life her family had built and stain the gentle rhythm of the town with scandal and scandal. Suspicion. The secret began in the winter of 1902. A year before the story we now tell. That winter had been merciless. Snow piled high on the barn roofs, and the river, once a gentle companion, froze solid, cracking in harsh, jagged lines across its surface. The sisters had been sent by their father, Henry Barton, to fetch provisions from the neighboring town, a trip that required walking along a narrow, ice-lined path for nearly 2 miles. Lillian had stayed behind at the house one morning, claiming a headache, while Margaret and Edith trudged through the snow, their skirts damp and boots caked with ice. That day, a stranger came to the house, a man whose eyes were sharp and calculating, whose coat was too fine for Millbrook, and whose presence was unsettling even before he spoke. He introduced himself as Mr. Whitmore, a visitor claiming interest in the Barton property, the land, and the business. To Margaret and Edith, he seemed harmless enough, an odd city gentleman who had lost his way in the snow. But to Lillian, something in his gaze struck her as dangerous, almost predatory. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she watched him study the photographs on the mantel, the neat rows of books, and the delicate china displayed in the dining room. And then he lingered, his voice soft but persuasive, asking about the family, probing for details that seemed far too precise for casual conversation. That night, after he left, Lillian could not sleep. She paced the wooden floors, listening to the wind moan through the cracks in the walls, feeling a deep unease that she could not name. The following weeks revealed the truth of her fear. Mr. Whitmore returned repeatedly, always polite, always smiling, but his questions grew more pointed, his interest in the family business and the sisters' routines unsettling. Lillian began to notice small things that did not belong in a normal stranger's curiosity. He asked about the storage in the attic, about the family letters kept in the bureau, about her father's ledger entries, and he lingered near Margaret's room as if searching for something. And then came the first whisper of danger, a rumor from the town baker, who had seen Whitmore speaking with men at the train station. men whose coats carried the insignia of private detectives. Lillian realized that this man was not a casual visitor. He had come to Millbrook for a reason, and that reason had nothing to do with ordinary business. The secrecy consumed her. She began keeping journals, hiding her thoughts between the folds of sewn linens and beneath loose floorboards. She would write at night by the light of a kerosene lamp, recording every encounter, every word, every movement that felt off kilter. Lillian knew that no one could suspect her of harboring fears or knowledge. Not her sisters, not her parents, not the neighbors who smiled too brightly and asked too many questions. She learned to walk quietly, speak softly, and nod politely, while masking the storm within. And yet, even with such caution, Lillian could not escape the growing tension, the creeping fear that the secret she guarded was a dangerous one, capable of destroying not just her family, but the peaceful life of Millbrook itself, back by spring of 1903. The air had begun to thaw, and the world outside Lillian's windows took on a deceptive warmth. Birds returned to the budding trees, children played in the open fields, and the river sparkled as if the icy winter had never existed. But for Lillian, the tension never left. She had discovered that Mr. Whitmore's interest in the Barton family was more than professional. Letters she intercepted, hidden under her father's ledger, suggested a threat, a claim against the Barton land, and the promise of ruin if certain conditions were not met. Lillian knew she could not reveal this to her father or sisters. They would never understand the danger, and revealing it prematurely could invite disaster. She resolved to act in silence, to protect her family without drawing attention to herself. The turning point came one humid afternoon in June, when the three sisters were sent to the Millbrook market to deliver baskets of eggs, butter, and preserves. Lillian walked between Margaret and Edith, outwardly laughing at a joke Edith made, while internally she observed Mr. Whitmore waiting near the general store, his expression sharp, calculating, and unmistakably threatening. Lillian's heart raced as she realized the depth of his persistence. This man, who had been visiting, questioning, and probing for months, now seemed to be orchestrating something tangible. The townsfolk might have dismissed him as eccentric, but Lillian saw the truth. He would stop at nothing. That evening, under the dim glow of the gas lamps, Lillian confronted him. Alone, in the shadowed alley behind the general store, she asked, in a voice as steady as she could muster, why he persisted in seeking the Barton family. Whitmore smiled, a cold, practiced curl of his lips, and spoke in riddles, weaving half-truths with threats. He suggested knowledge of family secrets, hinted at claims that could ruin the Bartons, and left her trembling with fear and resolve. She returned home in a daze, determined that her sisters must never learn the truth, that her father must remain unaware, that she alone would shoulder the burden got by midsummer. Lillian had begun a careful campaign of subterfuge. She altered letters, hid documents, misdirected the stranger with subtle falsehoods, and maintained her outward persona as the gentle, obedient middle sister. Neighbors continued to see the trio walking in perfect harmony, laughing like any ordinary sisters. Only Lillian knew the hidden fear that clutched at her heart each time the door creaked or a shadow fell across the windowsill. Her secrecy became an obsession, a second nature, and yet, each night, the weight of the secret threatened to crush her, and so life went on in Millbrook. Children played along the banks of the river, wagons rattled down the cobblestone streets, and families gathered for Sunday dinners with laughter and music. But beneath the cheerful surface, Lillian's hidden struggle persisted. She knew that one misstep could ruin everything, that Whitmore's pursuit was relentless, and that she alone bore the responsibility of protecting her family from the shadows closing in. She moved through her days like a careful dancer, balancing appearances. With deception, love with fear, and loyalty with cunning. As July turned to August, the threat escalated. Letters became bolder, the presence of Mr. Whitmore more insistent. Lillian realized that the secret she carried was no longer something that could be contained in private journals and whispered thoughts. It required action, a plan, a courage she did not know she possessed. She began to consider ways to outmaneuver him, ways to protect her sisters and her father without revealing the peril they were in. And in those quiet, desperate moments, she began to transform from the sweet, compliant middle sister into a guardian of her family, a hidden force moving silently in the shadows of Millbrook. By the time autumn arrived, the town was unknowing of the storm beneath its gentle surface. Leaves turned gold and red, the river ran clear, and the Barton sisters continued their daily routines, still identical in appearance, but fundamentally changed in spirit. Lillian had learned the true meaning of courage, the power of secrecy, and the necessity of sacrifice. And though no one could see it, the middle sister carried a weight far greater than her years, a burden that would define the summer of 1903, and the shocking revelation that would one day unsettle not just Millbrook, but every soul who believed. They truly knew the Barton family. The story of Lillian Barton was only beginning, and the secret she bore would soon ripple outward, touching lives and hearts in ways no one could predict. It was a secret born of fear, love, and cunning, a secret that would test the very foundation of the family bond, and a secret that, once revealed, would astonish all who had ever looked at the three sisters and thought they knew them. The weeks following that fateful summer grew heavier with anticipation, and Lillian felt the walls of the Barton home pressing in on her. Her father, Henry, remained blissfully unaware, immersed in the bookkeeping of his general store and the care of the land. Margaret continued to bury herself in ledgers and letters, her quiet intelligence shielding her from the world's prying eyes. Edith's laughter filled the hallways and meadows, her carefree spirit blinding her to the danger looming just beyond the white picket fence. Lillian, walking between them, bore the weight of knowledge and fear alone. She had become the silent sentinel, moving through each day with a delicate balance of poise and vigilance, ever watchful for the shadow that had crept into their lives. The town of Millbrook, so small and tight-knit, had no awareness of the stranger's relentless focus on the Barton family. The neighbors, who had once whispered about the beauty and charm of the three sisters, now looked upon them with admiration, seeing only the harmony and grace that the Bartons projected. But Lillian knew better. Every glance, every passing stranger, every unexpected knock at the door brought with it the possibility of disaster. She had begun to notice patterns, the way Mr. Whitmore appeared when least expected, the way he lingered near the general store, and how the mail always seemed to bring news that she had to intercept and guard. One crisp morning in early September, Lillian noticed Whitmore in the distance, standing by the edge of the river where the children often played. His posture was deliberate, calculating, as though he were waiting for someone or something. Lillian's pulse quickened. She could not allow her sisters to see him. If he approached Margaret or Edith, the consequences could be catastrophic. She made a decision. She would confront him directly, using her wits and courage. Rather than risk exposing the family to the threat, Lillian approached cautiously, walking along the riverbank, her skirts brushing the dewy grass, her heart hammering in her chest. Whitmore turned as she neared, and for a moment she thought he might recognize her bravery for what it was. But his expression was unreadable, a mask perfected over months of practice. He greeted her with the same soft politeness, the same carefully measured charm, and asked her questions about the family and the land. Lillian answered sparingly, never giving away more than she needed to, always aware that her words could become weapons in his hands. "You're clever," he said at last, his voice low, almost admiring. "You see things others do not, but cleverness can only protect you so long." His words, though calm, carried a threat, a promise of consequences should she falter. Lillian nodded, pretending to understand, pretending to be impressed, all the while plotting in her mind how she might turn the situation to her advantage. That night, she wrote feverishly in her journal, detailing the encounter, dissecting his words, and planning her next moves. The journal, hidden beneath the floorboards, in her room, had become her most trusted confidant. Days passed, and Lillian's tension grew. She began to notice other signs: footsteps at odd hours, shadows that did not belong, and notes slipped under the door in handwriting she could not decipher. She realized Whitmore had allies, people working in secret to uncover what he sought. Lillian could not act recklessly. One misstep could mean ruin for the family, or worse, danger to her sisters. She studied Whitmore's habits, his timing, his patterns, and learned to anticipate his moves. The quiet town, the familiar streets and fields, had become a stage for a silent game of strategy, and Lillian was determined to win, no matter the cost. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and amber, Lillian overheard a conversation between Whitmore and a man she did not recognize. They spoke in hushed tones near the back of the general store, unaware that she had hidden in the shadows, listening. "We'll get what we came for," Whitmore said. "The Barton family doesn't know what's coming. By fall, it will be ours." Lillian's blood ran cold. She knew the threat was real, imminent, and growing stronger with each passing day. She needed a plan, and she needed it soon. In the days that followed, Lillian began subtle acts of defiance, small ways to mislead Whitmore without revealing herself. She changed the ledger entries, hid important documents in false locations, and sent letters that seemed ordinary but contained coded warnings to her father. She learned to use the quiet town's routines to her advantage: the baker's delivery, the school children's routes, even the river's edge as a place to observe without being seen. It was exhausting, consuming nearly all of her waking hours. But Lillian found a strange strength in the secrecy. Each small victory, each moment she kept her family safe, gave her confidence that she could somehow outmaneuver the relentless threat that Whitmore represented. But as September gave way to October, the stakes grew higher. Whitmore became bolder, sending notes directly to the Barton house, letters that demanded attention and implied dire consequences if ignored. Lillian intercepted them, hiding them in her journal, pretending to burn them when her father glanced toward the fireplace. She could feel the weight of the letters pressing on her chest, each one a reminder of the danger closing in. Yet she also began to see patterns, small cracks in Whitmore's carefully constructed image. He relied too heavily on threats, on fear, and she realized that with patience, cunning, and courage, she might turn his own tactics against him. One afternoon, Lillian noticed Whitmore following her sisters as they walked to the market. She realized she could not let him draw closer. Acting quickly, she devised a diversion, leading Whitmore on a chase through the narrow lanes behind the store, past the barns and meadows, all while keeping Margaret and Edith safe. She was swift, careful, and precise, moving like a shadow through the familiar terrain. Whitmore, frustrated and increasingly reckless, lost sight of the sisters, giving Lillian the advantage she needed. It was the first time she felt a measure of control, the first time she sensed that she might, after all, protect her family from the threat that had haunted her for months. The next morning, Lillian approached her father with subtle warnings, framing them as ordinary concerns about a stranger who lingered too long in town. Henry Barton, trusting and kind, dismissed much of her concern as youthful imagination. Yet he began to notice the odd persistence of Whitmore and promised to keep an eye on the matter. Lillian breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Though she could not reveal the full truth, she knew that the first steps toward safeguarding the family had been taken. As October deepened and the leaves fell in fiery shades across the fields. Lillian's resolve strengthened. She began to prepare for the winter ahead, knowing that Whitmore would not relent, that his intentions would only grow more insistent as the months passed. She stored food and supplies, arranged escape routes, and carefully mapped the routines of both her family and the town's residents. The middle sister, so often overlooked and underestimated, had transformed into a vigilant protector, her life, defined by secrecy, courage, and the desperate need to preserve the ordinary happiness of her sisters and father. And yet, despite her growing confidence, Lillian could not shake a gnawing fear. She had learned that the danger was real, that Whitmore's ambitions were not bound by law or conscience, and that any misstep could unravel everything she had worked so hard to protect. The town continued its cheerful rhythms, unaware that the delicate balance of the Barton family's life hung on a knife's edge, and that the middle sister, so unassuming and gentle, carried a burden that could not be shared, a secret that could change everything if revealed. That it was during this tense period that Lillian discovered a crucial piece of information, a clue that hinted at the true nature of Whitmore's obsession. Hidden in one of the letters she intercepted, she found a mention of a document, an old will, and a claim that had been long buried but not forgotten. It was the kind of detail that could destroy the Barton family's reputation, ruin their standing in Millbrook, and give Whitmore the leverage he sought. Lillian understood that, to confront him directly, she would need more than cleverness and courage. She would need strategy, allies, and an unshakable resolve. The middle sister's secret was no longer just about fear or deception. It was a fight for survival, for the preservation of family and home. And as October gave way to November, as the first frost painted the fields silver and the days shortened, Lillian Barton prepared for the coming storm, knowing that the actions she would take in the weeks ahead would test her, define her, and reveal a hidden strength no one in Millbrook had ever suspected. Her secret, once quiet and contained, was now an engine driving her every decision, every step, every breath. The quiet, composed middle sister had become the unseen force guarding the Barton family, the one who moved in shadows, and the one who held the key to a revelation that would astonish her sisters, her father, and the entire town. The story of the three sisters was far from over, and Lillian's hidden truth was about to come to a head in ways no one could have foreseen. November in Millbrook arrived with an unforgiving chill. Frost coated the wooden fences, and the river, now slowing beneath a thin layer of ice, reflected the gray, overcast sky. The fields, once vibrant with gold and amber, were now muted, the tall grass bent and brittle beneath the early frost. In the Barton house, the atmosphere mirrored the season's austerity. Margaret and Edith went about their routines, still oblivious to the storm quietly building around them. Lillian, however, felt the weight of her secret press harder against her chest with each passing day. She could sense that the calm would not last, that the careful balance she had maintained for months was beginning to falter. The revelation came unexpectedly. Lillian had been organizing the attic, dusting the boxes of old papers and letters, when she stumbled across an envelope that made her heart stutter. It was thick, sealed with a wax emblem she did not recognize, and addressed in a handwriting both precise and imposing. With trembling hands, she broke the seal and unfolded the contents. The paper revealed what she had feared, a legal claim that could strip her family of their property, their store, and their standing in the town. Worse, it contained references to the Bartons' private affairs, details that, if revealed publicly, could humiliate her father and ruin the sisters' reputations. The letter made clear that Whitmore had allies beyond Millbrook. He was not acting alone. Someone had been feeding him information for months, tracking the family's every move. Lillian realized that the quiet vigilance she had relied upon might not be enough. This was no longer a matter of clever diversion or subtle deception. It was a battle that required courage, precision, and a willingness to confront danger directly. She understood, in that moment, that her secret, her role as the family's hidden guardian, was about to be exposed, whether she wanted it to be or not. Determined, Lillian acted swiftly. She retrieved her journal, carefully noting each discovery, each letter, and every interaction with Whitmore. She also mapped the timing of his visits, his known allies, and the routes he favored when approaching the Barton home. It was painstaking work, and exhaustion gnawed at her, but she knew that preparation was her only chance to protect her family. Her evenings were spent by the light of a dim lamp, her hands cramped from writing, her mind racing with strategies. Yet despite her tireless planning, an unease settled deep within her, a gnawing feeling that Whitmore might already be steps ahead. It was during a cold, gray afternoon that the first confrontation occurred. Lillian had gone to the general store to retrieve supplies, carrying baskets in her hands while her eyes flicked to the street, watching for the unmistakable figure of Whitmore. She saw him almost immediately, lingering near the corner, his posture calm but predatory. Panic surged in her chest, but she forced herself to remain composed. He followed at a distance as she made her way back home, eyes narrowed and lips pressed into a thin line. Lillian understood that the next encounter could change everything, and she resolved not to falter. That evening, after supper, she confronted him outside the house. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside, "I know what you're after. I know your letters, your claims, and your plans. But you will not succeed here." Whitmore's expression, usually cold and controlled, flickered for a moment with surprise. He stepped closer, his shadow long in the lamplight. "You are brave," he said quietly, "but bravery alone will not protect your family. You are clever, yes, but cleverness can only take you so far." His eyes held a warning, sharp and unyielding. Lillian understood that he believed her defiance was merely youthful foolishness, yet he did not realize the depth of her knowledge, or the subtle measures she had taken to shield the Bartons. Over the next few days, tension in the Barton household escalated. Margaret noticed the strain in Lillian's expressions, the way her sister would pause at odd moments, lost in thought, or rush to the window to watch for a shadow along the street. Edith, ever perceptive in her own way, sensed the unspoken anxiety, but could not grasp its source. Lillian's father, though loving and attentive, was unaware that danger now hovered near the home like a dark, silent storm cloud. The sisters remained physically together, their outward appearances unchanged, but Lillian's hidden role as protector increasingly separated her from the ordinary joys they shared. The decisive moment came one November evening when Whitmore, confident in his own maneuvering, attempted to seize one of the critical documents Lillian had hidden. She had anticipated this move and set a trap. When he entered the house under the pretense of casual conversation, Lillian guided him subtly toward the parlor, where she had arranged a decoy bundle of papers. Whitmore, believing he had discovered the Barton secret, examined the documents with satisfaction, unaware that the truly sensitive papers remained safely hidden. Lillian observed him silently from the doorway, her heartbeat loud in her ears. When he left, convinced of his victory, she exhaled slowly, knowing she had just passed a dangerous test of courage, intelligence, and composure. But Lillian's triumph was short-lived. That same night, a stranger knocked at the Barton door. Young man, rugged and travel-worn, claiming to bring urgent news. He spoke of Whitmore's associates in a neighboring county, of letters intercepted by authorities, and of a plan that threatened not only the family property, but also the reputation across the region. Lillian's mind raced. She understood that Whitmore's obsession extended far beyond Millbrook, that he had cultivated a network of accomplices who could act without warning. The stakes had grown exponentially. Faced with this new threat, Lillian realized that concealment alone would no longer suffice. She needed to act decisively, to gather evidence, and to confront the full scope of Whitmore's intentions. The burden. She carried the secret she had protected for months now demanded action, courage, and ingenuity beyond anything she had ever imagined. She spent long hours planning, weighing risks, and envisioning outcomes, knowing that one miscalculation could destroy everything she held dear. Her resolve crystallized during a quiet moment in the attic, surrounded by dust-covered trunks and faded photographs of her family. Lillian looked at the images of Margaret and Edith, at the smiling faces of her parents, and felt the full weight of her responsibility. She knew that her actions over the coming weeks would define not only her own life, but the lives of those she loved most. The hidden secret, long a private burden, was on the cusp of revelation, and the Barton family's fate now rested on the courage and cunning of the middle sister Dot. As November deepened, the tension became almost unbearable. Lillian watched Whitmore. With relentless vigilance, intercepted letters and communications, and continued to prepare her defenses. Each day brought new challenges, new threats, and new opportunities to outwit a man who believed himself unstoppable. She had become a master of subtlety, of strategy, and of quiet heroism, navigating the dangerous currents that flowed beneath Millbrook's tranquil surface. And yet, even as she moved with precision and determination, Lillian knew that the time was approaching when her secret could no longer remain hidden. The confrontations, the threats, and the schemes were building toward a climax that would shock her sisters, confront her father, and astonish the entire town. The middle sister, the one who had seemed most ordinary and unassuming, now stood at the center of a story that would reveal courage, fear, and cunning in equal measure, a story that would culminate in a shocking revelation no one could have foreseen. The winter air carried with it a sense of inevitability. Lillian Barton, once simply the sweet, obedient middle sister, was now a force to be reckoned with, a guardian of family and home, and the keeper of a secret so dangerous that its disclosure could change everything. Millbrook, with its quiet streets, frozen fields, and familiar faces, was unaware that beneath the surface a storm was gathering, one that would test loyalty, courage, and the strength of family bonds. The middle sister's secret was about to come to light, and when it did, it would shake Millbrook to its very foundations. The first snow of December fell quietly over Millbrook, softening the town streets and muffling the usual sounds of daily life. But inside the Barton household, there was no softness, no calm. Lillian moved with measured urgency, her heart tight with tension. She had known for weeks that the moment of truth was approaching. Whitmore had become impatient, more forceful in his demands, and more reckless in his pursuit of the Barton family's secrets. Lillian understood that concealment alone would no longer protect her sisters or her father. The hidden truth, long kept locked away in the middle sister's heart, was poised to emerge, and it was a truth that would astonish everyone who thought they knew the Barton family. It began one frosty evening when Whitmore arrived unannounced. At the Barton home, his eyes gleaming with a confidence born of months of meticulous planning. He stepped inside without invitation, his voice smooth and insistent. "Miss Lillian," he said, addressing her directly, "you've done well to protect your family so far. But secrets are fragile. Sooner or later, they must be revealed. Where is it?" Lillian's stomach nodded. She had anticipated this confrontation, but had not known it would arrive so suddenly, so boldly. She kept her voice calm, masking the fear that surged inside. "I don't know what you mean," she said softly, stepping between him and the staircase. Whitmore's smile flickered with annoyance. Lillian's mind raced. She had long anticipated a confrontation, and now she realized that the only way to protect her family was to take control of the revelation herself. Drawing a deep breath, she led Whitmore to the parlor, where the decoy documents had been kept for weeks. "If it's truth you seek," she said, "then you will find it here, but not in the way you imagine." She opened the bundle carefully, revealing papers that looked important, but were intentionally misleading. Whitmore's eyes narrowed as he skimmed the documents, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. "Clever," he murmured, "but I will not be deceived for long." Lillian had only moments to act. She reached under the edge of the table and retrieved the truly critical papers, the ones that proved her family's ownership of the land, the store, and their legal standing. They were fragile, yellowed with age, but unmistakable in their authenticity. She handed them to Whitmore with a steady hand. "Here is the truth," she said, her voice unwavering. "Everything you sought, everything you believed would give you control over my family, rests here. But it is useless if you harm us, because our standing is protected by law and history. You cannot touch what is ours." Whitmore froze, taken, aback by the boldness and precision of her move. For the first time, the middle sister, whom he had dismissed as ordinary and easily manipulated, revealed herself as a force he had underestimated. Lillian's calm defiance, her careful preparation, and her knowledge of every document, every claim, every subtle nuance of the law, turned the confrontation entirely in her favor. She had not just defended her family. She had outmaneuvered. A man who had believed himself untouchable, the revelation did more than stop. Whitmore had shocked the entire Barton family when they learned the truth. Margaret and Edith, who had always thought Lillian sweet, quiet, and ordinary, now saw the steel beneath her gentle exterior. They learned of her journals, her careful observation, and her months of secret work to protect them. Henry Barton, the proud father, realized that the middle daughter he had underestimated was the very anchor holding the family's safety and honor together. Lillian's secret, once hidden, now became the story of courage, intelligence, and unwavering devotion. Of the confrontation, though carefully contained, eventually reached the town of Millbrook. Neighbors who had admired the Barton sisters for their beauty and harmony now saw a deeper truth, that heroism often resides where it is least expected. Lillian, once simply the middle sister in a trio of near-identical girls, had become a figure of quiet legend. Her bravery, her ingenuity, and her steadfast commitment to family earned her respect that went far beyond the superficial admiration the townsfolk had once offered Dot as winter deepened. Life in Millbrook returned to its usual rhythms, though it was forever changed by the knowledge of what had transpired. Lillian continued to walk between her sisters, outwardly the same as always, but carrying a newfound strength. Margaret, inspired by her sister's courage, began to take a more active role in the family business. Edith, emboldened by Lillian's example, channeled her energy into helping the townspeople, organizing aid for neighbors, and fostering a sense of community resilience. The Barton family, united by trust, love, and shared trials, emerged stronger than ever. The middle sister's secret, once a heavy burden of fear and vigilance, had become a symbol of courage and resilience. It was a reminder that even in the quietest towns, even among the most ordinary faces, extraordinary strength can lie hidden. Lillian's story, her months of secret work, her strategic courage, and her unwavering dedication to family, became the heart of a narrative that would echo through Millbrook for years to come. It was a story of triumph not through force or fame, but through quiet intelligence, steadfast love, and the unyielding determination to protect those who could not protect themselves. The snow continued to fall softly on Millbrook, blanketing the town in a quiet white serenity. Inside the Barton home, the three sisters sat together by the hearth, their faces warm in the glow of the fire. Margaret and Edith listened as Lillian, at last, shared portions of her hidden journals, not the details that could endanger them, but the story of her vigilance, her planning, and her courage. Tears glistened in their eyes, and their hearts swelled with pride. The bond between them, already strong, deepened immeasurably, rooted in shared trust and unspoken understanding. In the years that followed, the story of the three sisters became a quiet legend in Millbrook. Visitors would sometimes ask about the Bartons, curious about their enduring presence and the respect they commanded. The townsfolk would speak of them not just for their beauty, but for the remarkable courage of the middle sister, who had carried a dangerous secret, protected her family with unwavering intelligence, and revealed her true strength at a critical moment. Lillian's heroism was subtle, quiet, and largely uncelebrated beyond the circle of those who loved her. But it was the kind of heroism that shapes lives, preserves families, and defines history in ways far more enduring than mere public acclaim. And so, the three sisters of Millbrook, who had once seemed indistinguishable from one another, became forever marked by their shared history and by the hidden courage of the one in the middle. Lillian Barton, the quiet, gentle, unassuming sister, had become the guardian of her family, the keeper of their legacy, and the hero who had faced danger and secrecy with unmatched fortitude. Her story serves as a reminder that sometimes the most remarkable courage resides in the quietest hearts, and that the bonds of family, once tested, can endure any storm, any threat, and any secret emerging stronger, wiser, and unbroken.